What's up everyone, welcome to the second video in the Faction Wars series. This is yet another tier list, this time covering the Dark Elves and the Orcs. As with last time, I'll be breaking down the strongest champions in each faction into a tier list, and going over general strategies for team building. Let's get started with the Dark Elves. The Dark Elves are definitely a strong faction, boasting incredibly powerful attackers. They are lacking in any excellent healers, so therefore this faction will rely heavily on lifesteal sets, which synergize well with their powerful attackers. Starting off with the A tier, all of the legendary attackers except Astrolith find their place in the top of the A tier. Ray is a devastating AoE attacker with powerful CC. Foley is a tanky attacker that packs a huge punch when geared. Zavia needs no introduction and will be an asset to any team. Vizier Ovelis is a newcomer, but will dish out good damage in the boss stages. And finally, Queen Eva will cleanse the mob stages with her devastating AoE. The last attacker that stands at the apex of the tier list is Lua. Although she is not a legendary, she will put everyone to shame with her insane damage. Luria finds her place in the A tier as a hybrid attacker and crowd controller. You can think of her as a mini Ray, although easier to obtain. Crimson Helm is probably the best defensive option that the Dark Elves have to offer. Sylar brings powerful move bar manipulation and a full set of AoE attacks. And finally, Blind Seer brings an insane shielding and revives. Next we have the B tier. Everyone in this tier is very good, even though they are somewhat overshadowed by the Dark Elves' outstanding A tier. For the damage dealers we have Delver, Kale, and Coldheart. Delver is somewhat of a jack-of-all-trades damage dealer, while Kale has a powerful AoE nuke and benefits from being very accessible as a starter character. Coldheart is a Void champion and packs a powerful % HP nuke skill. Warden is a good defensive hero, Painkeeper brings powerful utility, and Mystic Hand has useful healing. That's it for the B tier. C tier is next. Astralis falls into this tier. She's a legendary, but she's fairly lackluster. Spider is a useful debuffer and damage dealer. Ghostborn brings damage and useful utility. Judge is a good damage dealer in the C tier. He's also easy to obtain, being a rare. Retainer is somewhat useful as a defense champion that is good at self-buffing, but lacks team utility. Spirit Host and Hexweaver are decent buffers. Strategy is pretty straightforward for the Dark Elves. Build powerful attackers and make use of whatever buffs you have access to while relying on lifesteal for survivability. That wraps up the Dark Elves, so let's move on to the Orcs. The Orcs have two different strategies available to them, and which one you choose will depend entirely on one factor: whether or not you have Vrask. If you have Vrask, you can rely on him for insane healing and can therefore gear your champions however you want. However, if you do not have Vrask, you will likely need lifesteal sets, as the Orcs have no other viable healing available to them. Starting out with the A tier, we have Zargala, an epic that brings potent debuffs and super high damage. Robar brings a decent amount of crowd control and has very good damage as well. Angar is a good brawler that can both take and deal damage while provoking enemies. The strongest Orc champion of all, Warlord, will allow you to breeze through the Orc crypt if you're lucky enough to have this Void legendary. Lastly, for the A tier, we have Vrask, one of the strongest healers in the game. For B tier, we have Bloodfeather, Bonekeeper, and Gaelic, all respectable damage dealers. Also in this tier is Ironclad, who has a passive that converts healing to AoE damage. It's worth noting that I only recommend bringing him if you have Vrask. Together they can be quite effective. Veteran is a useful defensive champion, bringing attack down debuff to the team. And lastly we have Seer, a useful buffer who can deal decent damage as well. Finally we have the C tier. Torture Helm, Huntress, and Raider can all be useful as attackers even though they are outshined by better options. Terror Beast could be useful on some teams, but finds himself in a weak standing on the tier list. Finally, we have Shaman, who really only found a place on this tier list, even if it was the bottom, because she's a free champion that everyone has access to. For Orc strategy, either use Vrask or lifesteal sets to survive. Try to utilize some synergy between buffs and debuffs, as well as some of the limited CC if you happen to have access to those champions. That's it for this tier list. If you need more help or have questions, come join our Discord. The link will be in the description below. Good luck with the faction wars, and I'll see you all in the next video.